Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, listeners, for joining us this evening in the Dark Matters radio show. I am the Sorceress Cagliastro, Blood Sorceress Cancer in the hands of Nye, and I am grateful for the time people take to listen to this show. We get information on various matters that are perhaps not discussed in quite the same way elsewhere. So I'd like to introduce the audience once again to my co-host, Chris Rogue Ostrowski. Hello, Chris. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And Morgan St. Knight, author extraordinaire, our producer. Morgan, good evening.
Good evening, Sorceress. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Thank you for doing all that you do to make this show happen. Put it on the air. And our special guest, Victor the Voice Furman, who brings a very wonderful and special energy to our every week, and we're grateful for whenever we can have him. Good evening, Victor.
Thank you, and it's my honor to be able to join you.
So this evening, after much thought, decided that we would come to a time to discuss an interesting subject. Tonight we're going to talk about shape and invisibility. And these issues are interesting because much like gravity, everyone knows what they are, but no one can define. Absolutely. They cross all cultures. I have yet somebody who has a culture that does not have these particular aspects in the magical, if you will, aspects of their culture. There are two very different things, shape-shifting and invisibility. However, there are crossovers and there are many techniques. Some of us perform these particular traits and particular activities from our side, and some are from the other side. And by that I mean that there are those of us who perform invisibility, changing ourselves, and others of us who perform it by changing the way other people see. So on that note, I offer the floor to Chris to give us an idea about what he feels about the subject, and let's get to talking. And please join us in the chat room. We're just to your questions, and let's take it to the floor. What do you think about our subject tonight, Chris?
Well, I made a comment last week about when I was in the Marines, and we were always told that camouflage was supposed to be your ability to look like you belong somewhere. It isn't so much that you look like a tree, it's that you become like a tree. You get the energy of that. You get the feeling of that. So I kind of adapted what I do from that background. When I walk into a situation like, say, I'm out in the street and I don't want people to see me, I fade into the background. I change my energy around me. It's almost like I put like a shell around me where you can't see that I'm there. It's like I'm there, but you don't know for sure if I am or not. The same way, if I want my presence known, I can change my energy, and I can let everybody in the room realize that I just walked in. It came with practice. It took me a long time to get to that point where I could control things that radically at times. Some of it, I guess, could go back to my childhood when I didn't do that. I didn't want to be bothered in school, and I kind of hid. So that's where I got most of mine from, is out of necessity. I have seen stories of people that going back to old hoodoo practices, slaves walking off of plantations and just disappearing into the woods where nobody knew where they were. And I kind of adapted that kind of ability. I learned how to do that. I made myself learn how to do that so that I could just fade into the background where nobody could see me and I could watch until I felt that I was okay to come out and, okay, here I am. And it served me pretty well.
Morgan, what do you think?
This is probably one of my first loves as far as the study of the occult arts. When I first got into this, and I was a kid, I mean, I'm talking 8, 9 years old when I first started reading about witchcraft and the occult, I was drawn into it immediately with the rumors that people who were adept at practicing could shapeshift and become invisible, and I read all these weird little ways that they could do that. Tried them out. They never worked. But then along about 20, 21 years old, I finally got some good advice from people who were high-level practitioners. And for me, a lot like Chris, shapeshifting to me is actually about just being in the energy of the moment and being there in a way that you're supposed to be there, in a way that's not disruptive. And if you do that very well, that leads to the invisibility factor, too. You know, you kind of blend in, and no one notices anything is off when you're there. It's not so much that they don't see you, it's that they have no reason to really pay attention to you unless you want them to pay attention to you. As far as shapeshifting, there's a whole range of ways you can do something like that, from simple misdirection based on, changing your appearance outwardly to actually using energy work to make people perceive you differently. And then there's the true transformation where you actually do undergo the changes. And those are things that I think have been one of the few things that I've actually wanted to carry through my studies with ever since I was a kid all the way to this point as a person in my 40s. It's one of the very few things that has maintained my interest.
Well, I'll tell you, Morgan, that is something I've heard before. Not everything, but that people come to this work because the idea of being able to become invisible or do shapeshifting is really a magnetic draw. People are very interested in that. Even in pop culture, when it comes to the films we see and this sort of thing, when there is a story about any kind of high-level practitioner of the craft, they become invisible, and this is extraordinarily enticing to the human mind. And to talk about that, Victor, you have an opening comment on the subject?
I would agree with both Morgan and Chris, what they said in terms of this concept of moving our energy in a way that reduces our footprint, so to speak. I know for me personally, I'm a physically large man, and I've lost a lot of weight actually in the last couple of years, but I still have a fairly large physical presence. And I can go into a stealth mode where people, I'll walk up behind them and say hello, and they'll jump because they had no idea that I was coming up behind them. And it's nothing that I've done deliberately. It's just I try to be very respectful of other people's energies, and that's very important to me. And consequently, I may shut my energy down to a very low frequency so that my presence isn't felt until I'm actually seen or heard. But in terms of shape-shifting, there's something very interesting. I don't actively try to shape-shift. However, during some work that I've done in the last couple of years, photographs have been taken of me where I have a change, especially in my face, an energetic change in my face, where I may actually take on the facial aspects of a disincarnate that I'm working with.
Victor, you've just opened the floor to about 1,000 hours of conversation, and that's a wonderful thing, and we're going to talk about some of those things. Especially what you just taking on the aspect of the disincarnate. In the way that I work, invisibility is mimicry, and much of the healing work that I do, the work that I do when it comes to doing critical changes in one's life, myself or client's life, this sort of thing. I work in a particular set of rules created for myself that I will loosely call mimicry. Just trying to remove this a genetic disorder from my life, and I have, then what I did was mimicry. I went to those people who didn't have that thing, worked at the cellular level myself, and myself to become in a state of curve or wellness at the cellular level. This is a similar thing when it comes to, for me, in mimicry of that which is so obvious that nobody sees it. I will push myself to the larger structure. If I'm walking in a crowd with people who don't dress like me or look like me, I mimic them at the energy level. I create reflectiveness so that what people see is more of themselves. For me, invisibility and shape-shifting are done on the other side of the box, and I'll explain that as we go, where I am involving myself in being seen in a way that is either in the category of invisible shape-shifting, as opposed to actually changing my form. Although in shape-shifting, there's an occasional situation where, like Victor, situation will occur where I will take on the energy entity that I'm working with, and from an external point of view, I am appearing that way. Many have told me that that's happening. Often when I'm working with the Disincarnate, my eyes will change to the color that their eyes are, and many people have. And so there is a situation where I can change what I'm seen as or change what I am. And I would like to talk about this idea of working on the other side of the box as well as we go through the evening. And Morgan, you had said that you came at a very early age and you thought that this was the thing that attracted you to this. Is it a big part of your practice now?
I would say that for me, the part about blending my energy in definitely is so that people don't always see me there or maybe see me somewhat differently. But certainly my concept of it has changed. You know, I no longer expect to be able to rub a magic ointment onto myself and recite a prayer or a chant and change into some kind of fantastic animal. But much as Victor had said, I find that I don't even have to consciously do this. I walk up to people, and there doesn't have to be any noise at all, and they never see or sense me coming. And they always say it's very disturbing to them because they're usually, these are people who are usually very sensitive to other people being in their environment. So it's kind of interesting that it's actually become second nature to me now, and I don't really have to think about it to do it. And that's a very pleasing thing to me because it means that I've really absorbed this idea and absorbed this concept and absorbed this practice to where it is now a natural part of me.
Morgan, do you find that it happens now when you need action, or do you always have to click it on?
It will actually click on itself, especially if I'm feeling uncomfortable in a certain situation, and that happens when I go to certain parts of Atlanta. If I'm visiting people that I'm trying to help, you know, not every part of every city is a great part. And I find that I can usually pass in crowded areas or areas that are fairly busy streets without anybody paying me any attention. And I don't really have to click it on as much, although there are times when I do consciously do it because I say, well, I know I'm going into a circumstance where maybe I need to have the smallest footprint possible, and therefore I go ahead and consciously do it. But a lot of times now it just seems to happen, and I don't have to think about it.
You know, the people who with me and who use the method that I have gathered together have an understanding of some of the boxes. When we move energy and time around, we're not locked into this usual way that things have happened. If it happens ABC, using the boxes, we can make ACB. So, sometimes what I do is I use the boxes to go back before I got there and still be there. And what happens is the effect or the affect, as we're moving forward, is that people don't see me because I'm not there in their experience. I think that's a very high-frequency way to do this, and necessarily the way that other people do. So I find it interesting when I explain it, when they think that is what might work for them. Chris, anything like that?
I think that what we see with our eyes isn't always what's there. I think we lead to a lot of misperception when we're looking at things. I think if we went more by what we feel, I don't know if we would be able to do what we do, because people would know that we were there.
Okay, so you're saying that we use this so that we can function in sorcery?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, being sorcery is all the time, and that might be a little onerous to the people who are in my life all the time. But the point is that I'm always thinking of how I'm showing up in something, and from the ego perspective, from the perspective of interruption or opportunity. So for me, joining into that's around me, and some might call that shape-shifting, or the mattering on how the other people are experiencing what they're seeing when they view or cannot view me in the experience. So is it something that, is there a thread? Because I think there is not. I think we have so many interesting methods here that there is not necessarily a common thread, but maybe a common outcome. Because we're talking about taking on this other disincarnate. Do you do that personally, or is that something that other people are seeing it? And do you think it's actually happening, or it's what other people are seeing as an overlay?
I think what, in my experience, number one, has not been intentional, but I can tell you there's a very visceral response when it's happening for me physically. And normally, not normally, but when this has happened, there's been a tremendous sense of emotion being projected from the other side, from the disincarnate. And I feel that emotion physically, and when I'm feeling that emotion, I start feeling it in my vocal box, I start feeling it all over my body. And what's actually happened is these images have shown up on photographs rather than actually being seen by people as I'm doing the work. Although I've had people tell me that prior to these photographs being taken, they do see changes in my eye color. I have brown eyes, and they say my eyes actually turn a goldish color when this happens.
Do you have any physical sensation?
Say again, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think I'm having a little problem with my microphone tonight. Please do tell me if that's happening. Any physical sensation during these changes?
Oh, absolutely. I feel I'll feel sometimes a pain in the pit of my stomach. I'll feel a tremendous, overwhelming sense of either sadness or joy, depending upon the nature of the disincarnate coming through. I feel a loss of sense of self from the external. I don't feel an external presence. I feel strictly internalized when this happens.
Do you think that this is a possession? Habitation?
I don't think it's a possession. I think it's more of allowing my physicality to be used as a transmission point.
You work quite with people who are transitioning. And do you think the experience of them transitioning has something to do with what's happening to you? Or does this happen to you when you are in other environments?
No, this is actually not during when people are transitioning or in hospice situations or the like. This has been where I've been working with a paranormal team, actually, getting in connection with disincarnate at various locations.
I know that I think my audio is a little bit, please tell me if it is. I just want to make sure that we don't drop out and that you guys can hear everything that we're saying. Listeners, I thank you for your patience. Morgan, you talk about the science of, and it's really good if we open a wonderful piece of research that you do every week early in the show, start to pick from it and utilize it in our conversation. Do you want to talk about what you've been researching?
Sure. I've been researching both these areas, both invisibility and shape-shifting. And for invisibility, from the science standpoint, of course, we know about things like stealth fighters that can avoid conventional radar detection for aircraft. But for most of the other, it's still very much in the developmental stage as far as science. Much of it's being done on a small scale, and they don't even have enough to make a pen disappear. One of the bigger projects that they've worked on for invisibility is an invisibility cloak. It was first developed at the University of Tokyo. Basically, it's made out of this special material that is impregnated with microscopic glass beads, and it has a camera on the back of the cloak. So it's taking pictures of what is behind the person wearing it, and they're able to feed this through a series of equipment and project that picture onto the front of the cloak. So if you were standing in front of that person, you would appear to be seeing what is going on behind them. But still, it's very early stages, and because a person is wearing this, it deforms the fabric, so there's a lot of distortion, so you can tell there's a person standing there. Some other researchers at Duke University have developed something similar for invisibility, and they're able to make the object completely disappear, but only if you're looking at it from a certain angle, and the real catch is only at the microwave wavelength. So scientists have a lot to overcome for invisibility in order to make any real invisibility technology workable, because they have to use it at a bunch of different wavelengths, the optical wavelengths that humans see, radio wavelengths, X-rays, and even infrared, because a person could wear an invisibility cloak, but if you've got a FLIR camera or you have any other heat-sensing technology, you would still see the person there unless they find a way to dampen the person's body temperature. There's a lot more progress in the shape-shifting area, and it's gone on for decades. Most people have heard of Marie and Pierre Curie, who won the Nobel Prize for their studies of radioactivity. But a lot of people don't know they had a daughter, Irene Curie, who, along with her husband, Frédéric Joliot, built on her parents' work. They were able to expose certain substances like aluminum to radioactive materials. And when they did that, the aluminum changed first into a radioactive form of phosphorus and then into silicon. It was actually transmuting an element. And Irene Curie and Frédéric Joliot won a Nobel Prize for that. And a lot of people, when they hear what I just said, transmutations of the elements, think about alchemy, the quest to turn lead into gold. And scientists can do that now. They don't do it with lead. They can do it with mercury. In 1925, a Japanese scientist exposed a small amount of mercury to very strong electric current, about 150,000 volts. And after a few hours, some of that had changed into gold. And other researchers now are able to do that by exposing mercury to radioactivity by putting it in a small nuclear reactor. It's still in the developmental stage, and really you can't get enough gold out of the process to make it worthwhile, because the cost of these experiments far outweighs the amount of gold you get. But it's still kind of neat to see that that's one way you can transform things. So there is a scientific basis for shape-shifting and transmutation. It's just a matter of, can we apply it on the macro level and do it on a personal level? And for science, we can't really do it yet, but that's where the sorcery comes in.
Morgan, I have to jump in here. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. This visibility cloak thing is very different than what I think of when visibility. What they're really some sort of photo optic adjustments, essentially, with projection and this sort of thing. And this is, yes, definitely the science of it, but what's more interesting about that is that there's such an enormous interest in this in science. And, of course, a lot of that has to do with the desire to be still, and I understand that. There's applications for that. But what I'm talking about when it comes to invisibility for me is actually physically standing right there, not being seen. And that's really the fun of sorcery for me, and for those people who are listening to this and want to be clear that what we want to do here is any kind of trickery. And the sense of cloaking is really visual trickery, like this new fabric that has come out that's so black you can't see it. Have you heard about this?
Yes.
It's because of the way it's constructed, it becomes something that your cones and your rods are not really great. So these are ways to be invisible, if you will, by the manner of cloaking, which is very different than using sorcery. And I'm so glad that you brought it, because I want to make this that there are ways to become visible, but what does invisibility mean? If no one in the room can see and I'm there, am I there? Am I being seen by anyone? Am I there being myself? I can see them. So there's that area between myself and them where they don't see me. I don't become involved with them in any way. And experiencing everything they're experiencing. I can hear what they're hearing. I can see what they're seeing. This is sorcery. This is what people think of as high magic. I'm interested in methods regarding that. So anybody want to talk about, are there any questions in the chat regarding invisibility?
So far, no questions in the chat room, and I'd like to remind our listeners that if you'd like to put a question in, you do have to sign in to Blog Talk Radio first, or you won't be able to, you can read the comments, but you won't be able to post one.
I'm just, if the audio is any better, you guys all hearing me okay? Because if not, I'll hang up and call back in.
It still seems a little broken up to me, but it's getting a little clearer. It's not quite as bad.
I'm going to hang up and call while you guys discuss invisibility.
Okay.
Morgan, when you were doing your research, did you come across anything for the Philadelphia project?
I did not, but I have studied that before, and that's a really interesting thing because their way of doing invisibility, if I understand it correctly, and I may not because I haven't read too much in depth on it, but if I understand it correctly, their whole idea was they were actually taking the ship and making it invisible by slipping it into a different dimension. And it had some rather unfortunate side effects, apparently.
Yeah. From what I understood, it was Tesla had a lot to do with that. They used a couple of his coils on the ship, and there was the voltage from there that was supposed to open up a portal for the ship to disappear into.
Right.
Yes, Tesla
and
had to do with that and didn't do not get the outcome that he desired.
I don't think anybody desired that outcome.
No.
No. For our listeners who don't know what allegedly happened, and of course you can imagine there's no hard evidence around for us to look it up because someone would cover that up if it really did happen. But what happened was the ship itself not only went into another dimension, but it actually lost a lot of its material substance. And some of the crew became disoriented and shifted position, which they were told not to do. And they shifted into areas which had previously been solid walls. And when the ship came out of this interdimensional rift or wherever it had slipped into, those walls, those bulkheads rematerialized, and the men were trapped half in and half out, totally melded with the walls. And of course, obviously dead at that point. But, this was a really horrific ending to what they thought would be a very promising piece of technology to give them the upper hand.
And I think, that brings up a very big question, and that's the question of, do we have the capability, or is the technology, the science, the sorcery there that allows us to slip from one dimension to another? And I think that's really a great question.
Victor. Well, and the question of that is, be ever going to be able to know? Because I have a very strong thing about the science of sorcery, I practice it, and the technology around me that I can plug into things even more possible than already are. So do you links that already exist, we're using it that way? And I certainly think are. When it comes to the science of sorcery as I see it, I work with 4 pillars, specifically the iron sorcery, the boxes, and something called the static practice. And in the static practice, it's a situation where I am standing in the energy, being the energy, and yet not being the energy. And invisibility is often a byproduct of static practice. People will didn't even see you there. What were you doing? Or I'll stand when I go and I Disincarnate and I'm in a sense and want to be part of that thing or be close to them. And I go with other people. They can't find me for a while. And yet I see them walking around looking at me. It happened, a couple of weeks ago here. So that experience is a constant. So how the possibility of adding technology to that kind of ability, where could that bring us? What are the possibilities? Thoughts?
Well, I think the possibilities would be astonishing, because if we could do this, then we would gain a visceral understanding of what's going on in the physical universe, whereas right now, a lot of things such as string theory, which deals with multiple dimensions, and they're supposedly so small you can't really access them, this is all mathematics. People may be able to see what it might look like in their mind, but to be able to experience it, that would bring us to a whole new understanding. And I think ultimately we will be living a visceral physics lifestyle, whereas we'll be able to manipulate ourselves, maybe with the use of magnetics and other technology, but for a large part manipulate on our own will, be able to manipulate the universe around us. And is it science? Is it sorcery? I'd say they're both the same thing, just a different perspective.
100 years ago, talking on set was sorcery. So what is sorcery now? Where is that limitation? Where is the definition? Mm-hmm. If we look at the idea of mimicry, if we look at sorcery and mimicry, which is very much what most of what I do has the component of mimicry, and I'm mimicking somebody else's technique. What I mean is mimicking that at the cellular level, mimicry based on what it is that I intend to become, do, or derive from that moment. And in those times, I think sometimes if you watched an image of someone become invisible, do you get closer to the experience of being able to be invisible? And this is where film and technology, these things can help us. If you watched an image over and over and over of an individual go from being completely in their full form to fading into invisibility, and you could mimic that and use the sorcery to do it, how is that any different than learning these high concepts of technology by observation and repetition? Anybody?
Well, I'll throw in real quickly that to me, I guess it would be a very big help for me if I could see it. A big part of, if I could see someone becoming invisible, if I could even see somebody engaging in the mimicry and watch that actual transformation from an outside subjective viewpoint, because I think that we learn best not just by reading about something or theorizing about something, and of course practicing it, but also by watching others do it. And there's a little bit of me that says human beings, being the creatures we are, we still have this prove it to me, let me see it. And anytime you get to see something like that actually happening, it reinforces your belief that, yes, this can happen, that knocks down those barriers of resistance in your mind that may be keeping you from doing it, and that brings you much closer to being able to fulfill that for yourself.
Well, for me, the idea of shapeshifting or invisibility is all creating a situation where you are seen by the other person amount and in the way that you. So based on that, what techniques do we use? Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, you're dropping in a bit. You're dropping out again. So could you repeat it? Because I think we missed the crucial words that would help us respond to it.
I'll just interject something while Sorceress is trying to reconnect. And one of the aspects she had mentioned about being in a room and being present and being able to hear, see, and gather information from people without them being aware of presence. And if you take the concept of projecting consciousness or remote viewing, that's one aspect, one way of doing it. Chris?
Yep. I could see that. I haven't done a whole lot of experience with remote viewing. As far as what they talk about for like the military and things like that. I've tried it. I just I can't grasp it quite yet. Pretty much, I can see maybe like into the next room, but getting any further than that, I have trouble with. So that.
Chris,
go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
That sounds better.
Is that better? Okay, I just changed phones. So, so moving that kind of a distance is something that is different for you than moving short distance? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the further out it gets, I start to have trouble maintaining my concentration that far. I do practice that because I really want to learn that. I think that's intriguing, and I, like anything else, I don't stop learning. But I haven't gotten to the point where I can go a long distance away from where I'm at to do it. Like I said, I can see what's going on in the next room, and sometimes I can get as far as what's in the next house, which I really shouldn't say that. But mean, as far as...
But you just did, Chris, but you just did.
Yeah, I know. And I hope my neighbors aren't listening. But yes, as far as going, like, say, across county lines, no, I can't do that yet. I would like to, and I'm trying to get to that point, and I've been trying for, I'd say, a couple of years to do that. But like I said, I've just gotten as far as getting out of the house and, like I said, maybe across the street.
You know, there's one individual that I work with who is in another country, and I do quite a bit of sorcery with him. And we will do experiments where we say, did you see me somewhere and at what time, and this sort of thing. Very exacting data. With this individual, I'm able to do it, I would say, about 72 to 75% of the time. And back and forth. We can both do it about that much of the time. I don't know if that other 30 or so percent, or 28 or so percent, is the variable of our concentration or the variable of that which stands between us. Say, for example, weather, the electricity of storm, all of this kind of thing. But we're able to do this now. And I'm very interested in this because it is, in my mind, shape-shifting. What I'm doing is I am taking on a form of someone near him and presenting myself on it. I have my own ability to see who's near him, so therefore I'm using almost a divination level technique to create the baseline for where it is that I want to wind up. But I reflect myself onto that person. So is that shape-shifting? Because I perceive it to be.
Now, that almost sounds like what would be the definition of it. If you're projecting yourself onto something else, that would sound like pretty much what the shamanic practice of it would be, because you're imposing yourself onto an animal. Mm-hmm. So what would the difference be if you were doing it to, their Aunt Loretta?
Well, because the involvement is different. The shamanic practice, it is my understanding that the animal knows you are involved with them in some way. It's a communication level. So this is an issue where I am projecting my physicality onto someone that they might not even know they're carrying, so that he can see me in another country. And in that sense, I'm shifting the shape of myself to sort of cloak on top of another person, or putting my image there so that he can see it in another country. To me, that is a very pure form of shape-shifting.
Yeah.
I think that's a difference.
Yeah, that would definitely be a difference. If you're taking on the appearance, your own appearance on somebody else, then yes, that would obviously be the same thing.
Chris, your background is always very interesting to me, and I always want to get every piece of information from you that I possibly can. I want to absorb everything that you've seen and heard, because I love the varied background that you've had. And you said on a number of occasions you've done work like sin eating, and I don't know if our listeners know what that is, but in a sense, are you actually taking that energy in? Are you shape-shifting into that person and then taking on that responsibility and letting that energy go in a different direction? Because shape-shifting is really pervasive, if you think about it, in the way that it sort of it exudes itself. It slips into so much of the work that we do in sorcery. If I'm doing a critical healing from 3,000 miles away, don't I have to in some way touch that person, even if it's with my energy?
Yeah, I was going to get back to that when you were saying about the remote viewing. Now, what I do, what obviously you can too, is the distance healing. And when you do that, you definitely do touch somebody. I mean, at least I do. I know I touch them at least on the energy level. And I have had people tell me that they can feel my presence in a room. I can't see what they're doing, and I don't necessarily feel them. But people have said, hey, are you standing behind me? And, I mean, there's a good possibility I am. I mean, I'm not sure. But they can tell by my energy being there. Now, getting back to sin eating, that I am basically taking on the negativity of another person. My theory is that sin and karma and all that other horse shit is nothing but guilt.
No, really, tell us how you feel, Chris. Tell us how you really feel.
And a good analogy of that, believe it or not, is Charles Dickens' The Christmas Carol, when Marley shows up and he's standing there in all the chains and weights and all that stuff. Well, that's basically what I think of it as. When people die, they have this guilt. And what I do isn't just restricted to the dead, although I deal with that a lot. It also has to do with the living. This is what priests do for confession. All I'm doing is taking something off of somebody else. I'm taking the chains and trading my energy for their energy, taking all the bad stuff away and making them feel better.
So energy transference is a huge part of the work that we do, and it goes into everything, whether someone is calling me and asking me to keep a spouse away from them that is stalking them, or someone is hurting their children, or whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're looking for gold for somebody, and by that I mean helping them find a career path. It doesn't matter what we're doing, but the exchange of energy is always there. When I do critical healing, and I do a lot of it, more than I ever thought I would be doing, almost every day somebody calls me with something to fix. And I enjoy this work because I get to actually, in my energy extension, if you will, get to touch them and change something in their energy field. And the word energy is such a weirdo word right now because this New Age patina that's on it, if you will. But if you ever got shot with some electricity, you know that there's nothing New Age or lightweight about that. So when I get to do that work, to me that is shape-shifting because I'm reaching through and touching. Morgan, you said there were questions in the chat room?
Yeah, there are. Darren had a couple of really good questions. I'll go with the shape-shifting one first. He asked, why does shape-shifting seem to be such a big component in dreams? And I'll take a stab at that really quickly from my perspective.
Please
it's
do.
Because in dreams, we lose that sense of everything is impossible or something is impossible. We somehow, especially if you're in lucid dreaming, you know that you can shape your own dreams. Then you understand that, well, yes, it's my mind. I can do whatever I want to in there. The real trick is, can you do it when you're in a conscious state? And I think that people who get really good at it and can consciously control their dreams do actually have a much better chance of succeeding in shape-shifting and doing a lot of the things we've been talking about when they're in a conscious state. It's some people seem to need to go into that either sleep or a trance-like state to get it to work, but I think if they keep working at it, if they keep practicing at it, that they would be able to do it at need, at will, when they're in a conscious state.
Well, for sorcery to be at its and every one of us, and I agree with what you're saying, Morgan. What I want to add to that is not necessarily, from my point of view, to dreaming and lucid dreaming and that whole experience and what some call meditation or transitional moments, but to make those moments the way that the same kind of energy that happens in those moments have something that we can pull from them and do them while walking down the street. Because for me, science or sorcery means that I can do it anywhere, anytime, for any reason, without any tools and without any special situation to surround myself with. For me, it has to be that if something is coming at me that can harm me, I can do the same exact thing that I could do in a perfectly quiet situation in my studio with 4 mirrors pointing at me from 4 directions. So it has to happen on your feet. And I think that if you look in the animal kingdom, this sense of puffing up and looking scary to the opponent, when we watch that, it seems silly to us as human beings that one animal would put up a veil or stick out its fur or do a threat yawn and the other one would run away. But it's not just the fur or the veil or the threat yawn. What it is that the other animal, the animal that is not doing those things, is feeling a sense of thrown energy, powerful energy, an intent to harm. So when we can shapeshift in real time, someone coming at you with a knife or someone's going to hit you, and you shapeshift into something they don't want to have fight back with them, then this is a very proactive way to use shapeshifting in real time. How do we do it? We have to have images in our mind of what that scary thing would be. Or we have to have images in our mind of what it would look like for a punch to come at us and for us not to be there when it hits. So the practicing of these things is very important, and dream states give us the freedom, the boundarylessness of allowing us to just know what that looks like. It comes back to a sense of mimicry. Thoughts? Hello?
We're here.
You've got a lot to digest.
Yeah, it is. I think that's an excellent point. Is that you have to be able to do it in real time, in real life, and you mentioned the animals. To us it may look silly, but to that specific animal it doesn't, and that's all about energy. It's all about the wavelength of the energy that's being broadcast. We're not receptive to that particular wavelength, so when some lizard puffs itself out, it kind of looks funny to us, and we point and put it on YouTube. But if you're another lizard, you are receiving that energy much differently, and then that's when you get scared. I have to wonder what animals think of what we do sometimes. What does an animal think of?
Less from our behavior.
Yeah.
I have a story I must tell you. I've mentioned Ed Sharp a number of times. He's someone I knew for many, many years. He has since become Disincarnate. And he had a number of stores, and these stores were the kinds of stores that, let's just say, attracted people of all types, real nut magnet kind of novelty stores. I'll leave it at that for now. And I was in the store chatting with him and with a couple of the people who worked in the store. It had to be 20 years ago, maybe 22 years ago. And he left, and I was still in the store talking to some people. And two guys came in sort of a mannerism that one would perceive as they were staking it out or thought that they were going to steal something. So I walked up to one of them, and I said a few words to him in a very clear tone. And he left, and we called 911, and somebody came down. And this guy they already had him, the person that I had been speaking to, the police already had grabbed him. He ran across the street and broke into something and stole something from another store. And all he said to the police was, I don't know, there was those two scary females in there who were pushing me out the door. And that never actually happened. But that is what at the sorcery level it did. What I perceived was that my words were doubly as strong in pushing him forward. So he actually saw that as two aggressive women urging him towards the door. So this is what shape-shifting really is this powerful ability to split if you need to, or grow if you need to, or shrink, this kind of thing. If you can become a dragon, please do. I think that would be very exciting and interesting. But that is not the most useful way to take shape-shifting into your daily experience. I would like to be able to, do it for people who need to pass things that they can't pass on their own, and that seem ridiculous. I mean, to be able to go in and do things for people when they are supposed to be there, and to be there instead of them, and to shape-shift into so that people around them see it as if they were there. This is the kind of thing, to me, that makes shape-shifting very interesting. I know I'm putting out some very big issues tonight, and that's what the silence is. So please feel free to jump in.
So just let me ask you now, when that happened in that store and you put those words out there, describe for us the process of how it transpired, how you actually did it.
Sure. I walked up to them in a way, and what I thought in my mind was the natural thing to do here is to run away. I didn't even have to be there. This wasn't my responsibility, but it was my friend's store, and I felt very strongly that it needed to be protected. So I came into a place of protection. For me, that is a very large place. I become very large. I take up a lot of energy when I'm performing any sort of sorcery of protection. People at thousands of miles away, when I do protection on them, they feel it. So what happens is that I take up too much of the space. What I said in my mind was that this sorcery must double up on him. It must seem twice as heavy to him at all times for it to be effective. And I walked towards him with a very forceful kind of walk. And part of that walk was not even me moving. I only moved a little bit. It's not a huge store. It's not like I was running down an aisle. So when I walked towards him, I allowed myself, I took away the boundary of me getting as large as possible. So when I got as large as possible, he perceived that as a split of two people. And then I kept pushing the energy on him and pushing it. And when I saw in his eyes that there was what I perceived to be his version of a thing called fear, I pushed harder. And I allowed my energy to push on him, to touch him, to burn him, to make him uncomfortable, painful, until he ran out the door. So, the reality is he was a foot taller than me, and he had somebody with him who was sort of scoping out at the doorway. The other reality is that he got afraid because what he saw was two large women who were capable of taking him out of there. And that's my process. And then I have to come down from that process and pull myself back in and accept that now this energy must be recontained in a way, which is not really like pulling it in smaller. It's like finding a level for it to just settle at and find its place. And that's how I do it. I mean, I've been in stores with my daughter where people have walked up to us and they swerve away because of that kind of thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How physically challenging was that for you? Is there a physical effect to it?
There isn't anymore. I mean, at that point, there was still, that was more than 2 decades ago. That was a point at which I was really integrating my body into the work, the physical energy of my body into the work. Then, at that point, I was putting out too much physical energy myself and not grabbing enough from what was around me. So there was some exhaustion, not a painful exhaustion, but just some exhaustion. If it had been 5 years before that, I would have fallen asleep right afterwards. But now I'm at the other end of that extreme where I simply touch the energy around me, very much like my students understand the iron ring. The iron ring is created by just condensing the energy that's near you, pushing it far away, and making a deep wall that only you have the ability to push through, and nobody else can come in from the other side if that's the way that you build it. So now I don't take any energy out of myself, which is why when I do this work, whether it's this kind of protection or critical healing or working with clients, I actually have energy from that. Because now what I'm doing is touching all the external energy and becoming part of that.
Got it.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, is that when we're talking about things like shape-shifting and invisibility, the amount of energy that's needed for these kinds of transformations, it's really interesting how people can learn to draw that energy into themselves and channel it. I have a story a little bit about shape-shifting that happened a number of years ago to me. I was working at a nightclub here in Atlanta and helping out. The owners were my friends, and we were having a really rough night. And the night was finally winding down, and everybody was getting ready to go out, and I was finally able to take a bathroom break and go to the bathroom. And I was just in a furious, furious mood with all the crap I'd had to deal with that night. So much so that I could actually feel the anger building within me to the type of level that I'm used to using when I really need to do high-energy sorcery. And I was washing my hands and went over to dry them, and I happened to glance up in the mirror. As I did so, one of the club bouncers walked in, and he jumped about 2 feet back. He said later, and this guy was huge. I mean, this guy could take on just about anybody. He said later that when he happened to glance my face in the mirror, and it was not my face, he said it looked like there was a demon standing there in that mirror. And that kind of shook me up a little bit because I hadn't intended to. So I wonder if there's something shape-shifting intentionally, but are there times when we unintentionally shape-shift?
Well, Morgan, good work, first of all. And second of all, this concept of a demon being there and this guy walking in at just that time to acknowledge that for you might have been the work of an external entity coming so that you can see the work that happened. Sometimes they want us to know what happened, and they create a scenario in which we get the information that this is what happened. Just like this guy who was already grabbed by cops across the street, and I was able to hear what he said, which is what it's about, there being 2 women. So things happen if we stay still in the moment and we listen, so that we can get the acknowledgement of the work that we've done. After that, did you, to use Victor's question, after that, how did you feel?
Well, I have to say that at the moment that he walked in, that kind of broke everything for me. After that, after we got done, he didn't say anything to me at the time, and I wasn't sure why he had jumped back. I thought maybe he had heard something outside the bathroom and was getting ready to investigate it. We talked about an hour later after the club closed, and that's when he told me what he had seen. But immediately after that, I kind of felt very drained. I felt like everything was out of me, and all the anger kind of just dissipated almost instantaneously. So I'm not sure whether a demon or something else came to take that off me. If so, a very belated, many years later, thank you to whatever entity did that, or whether it was just my energy finding a way to dissipate by itself, but first manifesting as that image in the mirror that he saw. And I have to wonder, too, he saw my face in the mirror. I wonder what he would have seen if he had seen me face to face.
It could have been the same thing. It could have been you. It could have been, any combination of those things. Maybe you should use the boxes and go back and look at it. Seriously. You can find out what happened if you do that.
Yeah, that would be something interesting for me. The boxes, and that brings up some of the sorcery, and I wanted to get to the other question that Darren Allen had in terms of invisibility and some of the things that we go with in some of the sorcery classes you teach. Darren had asked if it is possible to use techniques like the mammalian dive reflex and tonic immobility to become invisible to the living. It's used to become invisible to the disincarnate, but can you use it to become invisible to the living?
Sure. The mammalian dive reflex and tonic immobility are 2 things that I talk about in the First Blood Sorcery Bible. They're both extraordinarily useful. I offered them to be methods to be amongst the disincarnate and to not be showing up as living, so that you can be amongst them without being sort of that external spectator, or not being someone they gravitate towards, so that they can communicate with you, so that for a moment you can just be still in the experience of being amongst the disincarnate. And that was really the reason that I brought them there. But to Darren's point, anything that one can do in many venues. So the difference between them, for example, the mammalian dive reflexes, it comes from mammals that dive into extraordinarily cold water. And what happens is the blood comes away from the surface of their skin and packs closer to their organs, so that the temperature between the skin and the water is not so different, therefore avoiding situations like frostbite or skin that's painful from the experience of being in the water, or skin cells that are dying in this kind of close contact with extraordinarily cold liquids. And in the other side of that, the organs of the body are protected because they're kept very warm, so it takes much longer for them to be affected by the cold. And that really is the principle, the basic principle of the mammalian dive reflex. Seals do it, penguins do it, all sorts of animals that jump usually from higher areas and go right into cold water. And one of the techniques to learn to do it, and divers use it so that they can dive longer, is to put cold water on your face over and over and over again, and to allow yourself this experience of the blood pulling away from the top area of the skin and making you simply cold on the outside and hotter on the inside. And yes, to Darren's question, it's absolutely useful amongst the living, because the living pick up heat. That's what we seek. As we walk close to each other, sorcery aside, what we feel is body heat. And if you're walking through a crowd, you create a small distance between yourself and the next person based on where you are. You know, if you're in the New York City subway, that space can be a half an inch, and you can be grateful for it. If you're in a place where there are a few people, that space can be, of course, broader, and personal space is redefined. But if you're in a space where you're walking close to people, it's their body heat that you feel, all other issues aside from feeling their essence or their energy or anything else, it's their body heat. If you're in a state of the mammalian dive reflex, you are already in a place where you are colder and heat is not being felt. So you put yourself in a physical invisibility, by which I mean their skin is not going to feel your skin in the same way. It is absolutely a usable technique to travel amongst the living and develop invisibility skills on top of that. Yes, the answer is yes. It's a long road, but the answer is yes. Comments?
Well, I think that was very helpful because not only the concise explanation for listeners who may not be familiar with the techniques, but definitely it opened up a new way for me to look at things for invisibility. Because as I was saying before, with these people who are dealing with the invisibility cloaks and all the science and technology have got a lot of obstacles to overcome, and one of them is the natural heat that people give off. So that's something they could probably take a lesson from us. If they could figure out how to do that, they go a long way to being able to make something invisible at the infrared wavelength, which is what a lot of military people would be using to detect intruders.
Yes, and a very desirable technique. And those of us who can do it sometimes wonder about who's listening and who wants to come to our house and learn to play. I want to talk for a minute I want to bring up two other options or two other areas in which these kinds of techniques are useful. If one is living in a situation, and for example, if one is living in a house with another person and the other person is violent towards them, and let's take out all the other stuff. Let's say, well, why don't they leave? Leave all that out. That's for a different show. Can you use these techniques of invisibility and shape-shifting to simply not be abused in the situation until you can make other choices? And I've taught this to people in very bad domestic situations, children who are afraid of their parents. I have worked with children like that, and people who are dealing with that kind of thing. I have taught, let's just say, children that I know to be in a situation in the classroom with a teacher who is aggressive towards them or hostile towards them or has something against them, and to become invisible and then hand their paper in. So these techniques are very usable on the day-to-day basis, because what is always important to me is the on-your-feet use of sorcery. So I like to bring up these kinds of subjects where people can use these things in their day-to-day life. And somehow, I don't know, but I'm feeling like I need to just turn to Victor on this. What do you think about this, Victor?
I think that's wonderful. I think it's an excellent self-defense technique that also empowers people to start using their energy in different ways. I think it's a wonderful thing.
It's very important to use the skills that we have and teach people what they can use at the ground level. Because, yes, this is enormous. And if somebody is listening to this and they have no experience of sorcery in their life or no acknowledged experience of sorcery, here we are talking about shape-shifting and invisibility, and it seems quite grand. But the whole point of sorcery is to be able to walk through your life in the manner in which you wish to walk through your life. I was watching one of these guys who deals with lions, And, this was a couple of months ago, and I don't remember exactly who it was. It's a pretty famous guy who deals with lions. And he's out in the open, and he's in a nature preserve. And two lions are running towards him, and he simply opens his arms. And the lions run right up to him and knock him over and lick him and, pretend like everything's fine, like this is totally normal. And I was listening to his story about that. And he said that he has to show them who he is so that they can completely find him and be okay with that. And then he said, if you try to become invisible to lions, they eat you. And in a sense, his complete visibility was his invisibility, taking away anything that was between him and the success that he wanted when he stepped away from this experience. I raise an atypical kind of dog. I have a breed of dog that is not particularly easy to deal with, that are not bred from wolves. They come from dingoes. And when I deal with them, I do things with them that their mothers would do to them when they're puppies, so that they can learn the techniques that they would learn had they been in a normal pack where they are under their mother's paw, if you will, for up to a year. And I think about what that looks like to them. When I do stuff to make them stop fighting when they're puppies, that is an unusual thing that you would do. Most dog owners would not do these particular kinds of things. What is it looking like to them? And I bring this up because I like to think about what shape-shifting and invisibility looks like to the other side. What are they seeing? Anybody have any experiences they want to talk about in that way?
Well, my experience with dog rescue.
Yes, I certainly do. Thank you. Thank you, and Morgan.
not so much that, but you got to understand, dogs don't see like we do. I mean, we have rods in our eyes that are concentrated to the front. We see things at pinpoint accuracy. Dogs see more like what we see from our peripheral vision. We know something's there, but we can't focus on what it is. They're set up for motion. They're not set up to recognize a face. So when your dog sees your face, quote unquote, it's not seeing your face. It's seeing you. It's your smell. It's your energy. It's your sound. It's your body heat. That's all the things that a dog picks up on. And I learned this from doing dog rescue. Some of the dogs I had under my care were ones that were not supposed to be adoptable. I was pretty much their last stop before they went to the vet and got the big pink needle. These were dogs that were aggressive. These were dogs that, especially were food aggressive, that you couldn't adopt to families with kids. Because, to be honest, a dog that bites is a lawsuit waiting to happen for any rescue group. I don't care what it is.
Right.
So I would get some of these dogs that were possibly able to be rehabilitated. And I understand what you're talking about when you say about you act like their mother. There's certain things that they do retain, and I don't care how old the dog is, that goes back to when they were puppies. And if you can turn yourself, not physically, but if you can turn your energy into being another dog, that's what they pick up. You become the alpha of the pack, and you project that energy onto them, that you become their superior. You're one of them. You're that weird dog that walks on its hind legs all the time.
Right. That's what I was asking. Is that what we are? Do they see us that way? And if they do, and I think that they do, then this is a really concrete example of, perhaps I am not shape-shifting, but it is a concrete example of the understandability of what shape-shifting looks like from the other side. Like that guy who lives with wolves, they at some point start to see him as a weird bald wolf. They have to, or they would just not accept him in. And when we do shape-shifting, do other people see us as exactly what we want to be seen as, or is there a gray area? Is it confusing to them? For example, when I went somewhere with my daughter, and I've talked about this story before, and she wanted a particular thing that they didn't sell that way, so I just made this guy see his hands, get what I wanted, and see me happy ordering it. So he did those things because that's what was necessary, because she couldn't touch certain things. They give her, she has a reaction to certain types of physical surfaces. So in that case, is he seeing a person who he was formally saying no to? Is he seeing that never happened? What is he seeing? And when you do shape-shifting, any of you do any kind of shape-shifting, intentionally or otherwise, what do you think the other person is seeing?
I think they're seeing a concept. Now, I go back to what Morgan said about the guy walked in and saw a demon in the mirror. Well, your idea of a demon, my idea of a demon, everybody else's, it's all different.
Right.
Was it one of those things he just saw something that in his mind was a projection of what a demon would look like? With all that negative energy being in a room, was it just manifested in that kind of image, that this was recognizable to him? Because that's what we see. We see faces that are recognizable. Just like anybody that goes outside and says, oh, well, I can see this in the trees. Yeah, and if I look over here, I can see this over here too.
Sure.
That's how we're set up. We're set up to recognize faces. Now, he walks in there and there's something strange. There's something huge. There's a big mass of energy somewhere. And he looks, and there it is. He's got to put a face on it. It's got to be something he recognizes because he's a human. It's got to be this. What is that? That's big, that's ugly, that's mean. It's got to be this. The brain
got to be in his repertoire.
Right. The brain has to come up with some idea or we lose it.
Yeah.
Most people...
The Matrix. Go on, Chris.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Most people aren't set up for that.
Yeah, it's the matrixing effect. And it's what I hate to bring up these ghost hunting shows, but a lot of times when people are looking at it, looking at something on the night vision cameras or the infrared cameras, they think they see something. And part of the time that is actually the camera itself doing its own matrixing, trying to focus and refocus. But it's our natural tendency to try to put impose our reality on the world and do it in a way we understand, like you just explained. And we have to be able to, our brain processes the information and it says, okay, this is what it must be because this is something I understand. The brain is not good at processing information that it doesn't understand and can't put to its previous experience.
Yeah, like the eye finish is a circle. If you have, 90% of a circle, at first glance, the eye will see it as a closed circle. Rick, do you have some thoughts?
I just wanted to jump in and say how wonderful and valuable the teaching of shapeshifting, the teaching of invisibility, would be to people who are abused, to children who are bullied, and to people in domestic situations where they're the victims of violence. And the gift to them not only gives them the ability to counter the bully or the violent partner, but also to give themselves a sense of self-worth. And I think that's just marvelous, and I laud you for doing that and think that would be a wonderful thing to do on a larger level.
I would love to do that on a larger level. That would be a great thing. And what else it gives them, and thank you for that, Victor, the other thing that it gives them is a moment to think, a moment to breathe, a moment where that other shoe isn't going to fall. And they can say, okay, maybe I can strategize, maybe I can think. And that is really the powerful thing. And I thank you. And if you can think of a way for me to do that on a larger scale, I'm ready. Just tell me where to show up. Because that would be a wonderful thing, the giving away of sorcery. People say to me, you give away a lot of what you do, and well, what am I supposed to do? Lock it up in a box and be really wonderful at it all by myself? It's pointless. I write a lot of books. I have a lot more books to write. I have 4 books right now that are, almost on their way about various small subjects in this work, and some on sigils, all kinds of things coming out. I try to put out as much information as I can, and I do a thing where I don't charge people $1,000 to talk to me for 20 minutes. I charge what I have to charge, and that's what I do. And I try very hard to give this information to as many people as possible. And the reason that I do that is because, like I've said a million times, I don't get worse at it if you get better. And if sorcery becomes something everyone is doing or many people are doing, then there's more data and more research and maybe some, quirky thing that I did 5 years ago will plug into something you're doing today. And we all get to levitate and change ourselves into what we want to be. So ultimately, the only intention to bring to this work is the intention of telling everyone how to do it and offering everybody a pathway to do it. It doesn't help me if I have information that'll keep you safe and I can't give it to you. It doesn't help anybody. Everybody benefits from this work, and that's the way that it works. I wanted to bring up this idea of directional sorcery. Does anybody else have anything they want to say on that subject before I go that direction? No?
Not directly. We did have one question in the chat room, but it may meld into the directional sorcery. So why don't you go ahead and then I'll see where we can work it in.
Oh, no, give us a question, Morgan, and then we'll answer that. I'll take it from there.
Okay. But the question was, are there certain demons who can help us out with invisibility and with shape-shifting, which I think is a brilliant question, actually, because, as Chris was explaining earlier, different people and animals see things in a different way. So could a demon actually help us to really do the shape-shifting so that everything perceived us as we want it to be perceived?
If there was a little house somewhere, and that's where shape-shifting and invisibility happened, there would be a sign on the door that said all energies welcome. And that's the best way I can open that discussion. Because, yes, demons are very, very helpful to me in shape-shifting. The disincarnate are not as helpful in shape-shifting, but they are very good at observing, so I can call upon them later and ask them what they notice. A lot of my data that I get, I report that way. I say that this came to me from the source of the disincarnate, and that a number of disincarnate told me that this is what they saw in this moment. Demons are wonderful for this because they come with such an amalgam energy that once they are in front of you or beside you or somewhere in close proximity to you, you can learn to mimic and you can learn to take on a vision or a version, if you will, of their energy. Come that thing. I have a number of attending demons. We've discussed this a million times. I have 9 that are numbered 1 through 9, and then there are 4 others. There is a possibility that there are 5 others. Some of you know who that is, who's trying to become one of my attending demons. In my numbered attending demons, number 8 is a fog. It is a mist. It is a non-structured experience of energy that can be sent other places to protect people, or that can grab onto chaos and pull it away. When I work with these kinds of demons, I can observe their energy, their structure, and I can mimic that so that I can use that for shape-shifting and invisibility. These are very, very useful energies. It's like having constant tutors with me who are showing me what it means to become one energy based on an amalgam birth, if you will. So I look at that and I say, can I do that in reverse? Can I be a single energy birth and see myself as many energies? And that's what happened in that store, is that I allowed myself to see myself doubled, and therefore so did this guy. So the usefulness of energies, any energies that come to you, can of course be used in shape-shifting and invisibility if you understand the concepts of mimicry. And I think that answers the question. Morgan, thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think it does. I've always felt that any other entity that gives us some sort of either input or it can add its energy to our own, anything like that will just build the process and make the process stronger.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing with each other. When we sit on Wednesday night core classes and we sit together and I come up with a subject and I talk about it for 2 hours and people ask questions, and then they send me questions all week and we have all these exchanges, by the next Tuesday night, 7 days later, the subject is now enriched and different and better. So in that little house where it says all energies welcome, this is exactly what's happening. It's shifting people's experience into the work, and therefore the work becomes broader. The gaze becomes broader. And that's why it's useful. So what I wanted to bring in was directional sorcery, because this is one of those, what I call the 4 pillars of my method, and there are many, many methods that people use. But if you understand what directional sorcery is, we're not talking about anything particularly ethereal. We're talking about the magnetic polarities of the Earth and what they have shown me they offer, in my experience. And in my experience, the north, south, east, and west bring in particular energies. So when shape-shifting, I can use those energies, or in the desire to become invisible, I can use those energies. The energy of the south pulls away, it decays, it breaks down the connection between where I stand and that energy with which I am dealing. So if I'm working in invisibility and I am conscious of which direction I'm working in, these polarities are very, very useful in the building and deconstructing of one's presence, one's self, and the building and deconstructing of one's image as another sees them, and when it comes to shape-shifting. So does anybody want to add to that? Crickets. I know what happens here. I understand what happens here, is that I develop these enormous theories, and we talk about them, and I've been teaching them for years. So when I put them out like that, they're a little overwhelming. So let me break it down and ask a question. Does anybody have a particular polarity that they lean towards when doing this work?
I would say mine would be north.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe kind of a northeast, because I want it done fast, and that goes back to how I started with the whole invisibility shape-shifting thing. Is I needed it now. It wasn't one of those things where I could wait. So that's where I would think I would go with that.
I've always.
You mean go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I've
always
please,
personally. Okay, I find that I gravitate towards the north almost instinctually. Every time I've had an altar set up when I've moved to a new place or just rearranged everything, it seems that no matter how the room is laid out, I always end up wanting that altar in the north or very close to the north, as close as I can get it. And until I read your work, I didn't really understand why that was. It just seemed to be the natural thing for me. And some of these setups were pretty awkward because I had to put them in that area of the room, and it wasn't the best place for them. But, nonetheless, that's where I felt that the energy was the best for me and how it got things done.
Well,
I've never consciously... I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Victor, please.
I've never consciously thought about this, but now that I am consciously thinking about it, I actually find that I'm bidirectional. I go northeast, southwest, and I'm not sure why.
Allow me the indulgence for a moment to talk about what the directions have shown me that they offer. And I put it that way because my work is science. There are no watchtowers, there are no goddesses, there's none of that in my work. And I'm only discussing my work because that is what I am the expert in. So in the experience of working with magnetics and energies and demons and the disincarnate, and my experience in working with the manipulation of energies on a large scale and being able to do grand work at extreme distances, I offer the following information about which directions offer us which particular plus, if you will. And I discussed this in Blood Sorcery Bible 2, Striking the Target, the second volume. And what my experience is that the things that we think of as north, and when you do this work, you put yourself in the center as the center of the human compass and place yourself where you are. And that is not as simple as it sounds. Knowing where you are in a moment is very important. And if you work north, what happens is that's increased preservation, cold, upward movements, moving at a focused direction towards something, bringing two things together, adjoinment. All those things are north. South is quite the opposite. It is the breaking down of things, the decaying of things, the separation of things, the taking something out of something else, the liquidating of things. And those two directions seem to be the sort of anchors, if you will, in directional sorcery, east and west being affects upon those things. And the way that it works is the energy of pulling east tends to be the speeding up of activities. If you want things to move quicker, then go east. And that the west affords one the appropriate timing. That's a tricky one. It might be appropriate to the activity and not appropriate to the ego. So one has to be careful when working in that direction and understand what it is that one will get from that. And to your point, Victor, northeast, this sort of thing will speed something up in connection. Southeast, however, will speed something up in decay. So the east and west are tools that we lay down upon the main energies of the north and the south. When dealing with invisibility and this sort of thing, and when dealing with the idea of changing shape in shape-shifting, and that means, as we've come to discover, many things to many of us, then utilizing these polarities is extraordinarily important, which is why I suggest that people learn the 4 pillars and learn how to use these kinds of things, directional sorcery just being one of the 4, even in moments of seeking instant invisibility or is seeking to shape oneself as something else. We're standing on the earth, the energy's right here. It's just right beneath our feet. It's just polarities. And until we have a polar flip, which is a long time away, this is what we've got to use. I think that information is very helpful because it anchors us further in the understanding of real time. Everywhere I am, I know where north is, because north is my particular proclivity, is to bend north, just as it is yours, Morgan, and I think you were saying so also, Chris. And I think that north is more often than not the direction that those of us who practice sorcery at the profound level, by which I mean all the time, tend to bear towards north. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I have a quick question, and
Please.
I think I know the answer because these should be universals no matter where you are. But just for anybody who may be wondering, hearing about this, listening to us, do you think it would be different if we were natives in the southern hemisphere? Do you think the polarities would shift there, or is north always north even if you're in Australia as far as the sorcery work? Does it always have the same connotations and the same applications?
It does always have the same connotations and applications. And that is what I've discovered talking to people doing this work in all sorts of places on the globe. And yes, one must know where north is from where they are. That's what the most important thing is. North is north. It provides the same energy and connectivity no matter where you are. As sorcerers, it is very important to always know where the directions are when we're anywhere that we're standing. And that, although that sounds like a burden, in the moment that you need yourself away from someone, if somebody is being aggressive towards you and you are working quickly in your mind to present yourself as invisible or shift it into a more affirming shape or a shape that is not as even as visible or smaller, whatever choice you're making, south would be a really good thing to know in that moment. So
it's really funny. I had said, just without even thinking about it, my sense was northeast and southwest, and I just pulled out a compass, and my desk, the position I'm sitting in at my computer desk, is exactly due northeast.
And that is a fact. I mean, I have troubles with the word fact, but the fact is that is your fact, your personal fact, is that is where your energy is best focused.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and this is a very good experiment, Victor, and thank you for that. I'm just impressed that you have a compass with you. I don't know. He says, I pulled out a compass. Like, hand me that piano,
I actually, someone gave me a compass keychain, which I keep in a little box on my desk, thinking that someday I'm going to use it, and guess what? I just used it.
You just did. Here you are.
That's it.
Maybe you didn't know in what context, but you are using it. We talk about not having too many tools, but a compass is a good thing to have. Know where you are. It's a good baseline. Morgan, are there any other questions in the chat room tonight?
I have not seen any. Let me double check. It doesn't look like there are any right now, but of course, listeners are always welcome to jump in anytime with the comments.
I'm getting some questions from people on Facebook in the little chat boxes.
Okay.
And somebody wants to know if in necromancy, is there a usefulness in shape-shifting and invisibility? And we talked a little bit about that. Does anybody want to pick up on that before I go off on one of my 11-minute diatribes?
But you've said before about being invisible to the disincarnate, because if you don't, you're going to be overwhelmed. I think it's something that you should do as far as if you're just working with one. If I'm dealing with one individual, I don't want 50 million people to be looking at me. I don't want all that standing around me because I want to concentrate on what I'm doing. And I make myself available to one person. Everything else is blocked off. It's like I just let one thing inside my little bubble, and that's it. Everything else has to stay outside until I'm ready for that.
So you're saying you become invisible to one entity only?
No, to all except for one.
All except the one. How do you do that? What is the mechanism that makes it? A
reaction for me. Like I said, my childhood wasn't exactly the greatest when I was in school. So it's more of a defense mechanism that I learned to adapt, that I only can be seen by what I want to be seen. I try to hide myself as best as possible, small and petite as I am.
I've met you. That's not true.
But you've even said, too, when I come into a room, you don't necessarily feel a disturbance when I'm there.
Well, you have a very, very real, visceral energy. You cannot be missed unless you want to be missed. And that's what's brilliant about your work, is as big and visceral as your energy is, when you want to just put it down and you just want to observe, one could forget you're in the room. It's very powerful.
And, well, that's what I do, like I said, when I'm dealing with a disincarnate. I want to concentrate on one thing and one thing only. So I started out envisioning something around me, like a ball or something that was, and I went to the color black. I'm a kid, I don't know any better. And I used black as a way to block everything out, because you don't see what's inside of that. If something black goes by you, you don't know what it is. You just know something went by. And that's how I started, that I just only let certain things see what's inside there. And it just adapted over the years. The more I used it, the more I adapted to it. And it just became something that, okay, it's it. I don't have to think about it so much. It just happens. It's like me, if I'm reaching in the refrigerator for a soda, I don't have to think about it.
So it's sort of automatic.
Right. It's there. I just, okay, what do I want to do? I want to talk to this person. Boom. It's on.
What about this scenario? If you want to meet someone in a public place, and neither of you know what each other look like, and you have picked up on this person's energy. Say I'm going to meet an individual, and I've spoken to that person online, or I've spoken to that person on the phone, and I haven't had a one-to-one. Can you create an environment where only the two of you can see each other for a moment, and you cannot see anyone else, so that you can make that clear connection? I do know how to do this, and this is something I'm very interested in talking about, where you both don't see anyone else for a moment, so the connection can be made.
Oh, yeah, that's almost like, it's almost like creating a tunnel. How can I say that? Did you ever watch an amoeba? We got to see that stuff in science class. And did you ever see how they can reach out with an arm to encircle something?
Yes, like the cilia, the tentacle thing. Yes.
Right. That is almost what it is like, that you extend this out that only the other person can see you. Because I can stand there in a room and I just look at somebody. I can look at the back of their head and they know I'm there. They'll turn right around and stare right in my eyes.
For a moment, go ahead.
I said I can also look at the person and go, ooh, I really don't want to meet you. And they'll never find me.
We've all been there.
Right.
Can you extend that energy so that for a moment you are affecting the other person's ability to see only you? And
because I got in trouble for that when I was a security guard. I worked floor security in one of the local department stores. And I used to get in trouble because I've had people tell me that you have too much of a presence, that they see you before you see them. And it's like, well, I learned how to tone that down, that I just, went back onto my training when I was in the military. I can sneak up behind you and you don't know I'm there. But if I would forget myself and it's like, oh, okay, I saw you steal that, and I would get excited, all of a sudden everybody knew I was there. And you can't do that when you're a security guard. I mean, you have to blend into the background. And I would forget for a minute that I needed to do that, and it's like it would be like I had a big red flag on top of me going, hey, I'm here.
So knowing when to pull it in and to put it out is useful in that day-to-day experience of being fully there and sort of anonymous in the moment.
Well, everybody would argue if I'm fully there or not. That's beside the point.
That's a different show.
I use that technique in business meetings all the time.
Tell us more.
I'll be sitting in a sales meeting, and I'll have one of my salespeople with me, and I'll have a client or customer there, or several customers there. And I will make myself non-existent and let everyone share what they want to share. And then when I'm ready to bring in my point of view, and my point of view usually brings things together, then I'll make myself very present. And it's very effective in sales technique.
That's like being a powerful closer, as if you had just entered the room and have all the information.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very useful. Very, very useful. You should teach a class in that. That's very useful. The thing I was talking about is an iron ring technique. If you want to meet somebody in Times Square and you are not absolutely sure what they look like, you have an idea, and they have an idea of what you look like, what happens is what I do is create an iron ring. And for our listeners to understand what the iron ring is, of course, this is, again, one of the 4 pillars. It is more than a circle. It's not like a circle on the ground as a traditional craft sort of, I guess, the things that we think of when we think of people standing in a ring. It is much more almost like a capsule, like something that starts as a single ring and spins like a gyroscope and covers us. And we create that by pushing energy away from us and clearing out the capsule in which we stand. We can program into the walls of that ring what it is that we're looking for. And when we do that and we're in the ring, one of the things you can do in the ring is develop a very strong sense of invisibility, that no one can see you unless you want to be seen. If you can understand how the ring is built, and that's not something for a 2-hour show, it's something that we study, my students study with me and people who read the books and have questions about that kind of thing, what you can do is put the other person in the ring with you. And you do that by the use of sorcery, by the use of mimicry, by the use of reaching out and touching their energy, accepting it in your hand, and placing them in the ring with you. And then when you do that, only the 2 of you are standing there in Times Square for as long as it takes. The idea that the boxes are floating around in time is broken is very useful as well. When that's happening, you can slow things down, speed things up. But you can create this moment where they cannot see anyone but you, and you cannot see anyone but them, and everyone around you is irrelevant. They can walk right through you. They can walk right through what they perceive as something sort of in the way, and they'll nudge themselves around it and this kind of thing. And you'll see that the physicality changes as well. People start to pull away and move at a distance around you as if the iron ring is tangible to them, because you know what it is. They just don't know what it is that they're seeing. the way that one steps away from a powerful heat or something coming up out of nowhere. So the iron ring technique is what is usable in this very high frequency kind of invisibility, useful to put two people alone in a crowd seeing only each other. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Thoughts?
It's almost something that I think a lot of us do unconsciously, because I can't count the number of times that I've connected with someone in a huge crowd, and that crowd ceases to exist while I'm in connection with that other person.
And when that happens, what is your physical experience? What's happening to you? More than just your visual experience. That we understand.
It's literally like being in the center of a circle, like you said, in a ring, with no one else being present there. It's literally like being isolated, completely separated from anything and everything else, energetically, physically, visually.
Do you feel after this kind of experience that energy has been added to your life or to your moment or taken away?
Oh, absolutely enhanced, definitely added.
And have you ever talked to the other person when that's happening? See if they're having that
experience? Have I interviewed them in the sense of what are you experiencing right now? No. But in that sense of being there in that present moment with no one else around, even though there's hundreds of people around, and being able to have the exchange of information, whatever that information that we're exchanging, is very profound.
And the other person knows it, though. They can feel it. They know that something's happened. They know that they were standing there waiting 5 minutes, and in that 5 minutes they saw everyone. And in that one moment they didn't. So they know what's happening, and they don't necessarily know how it's happening, but they know that it's happening. Things that we see in films, sort of like iconic moments, come from the fact that they are, although there are no absolutely agreed-upon cultural universals, there are things that we all see, or many of us see, as representing that thing. In most countries, a stop sign is a stop sign. In some other country, it might not be, but in most it is. So we have these moments, these very high-frequency moments of connecting like that. And you see these kinds of things in film often, where someone's looking through a crowd and the filmmaker will choose to make everyone else a blur. And every one of us can think of, if not an exact film, but a moment where we've seen that kind of thing. And this is an issue that I think is interesting because I am not exactly what one would call pop culture adept. I am not, I've been accused of living under a rock, and that's fine with me. But if these things get to me, and I've seen them, then that means that they're getting to other people, and other people are seeing them, and there is definitely a sense that these are common moments. So if they're common moments, then as sorcerers, we're doing them on purpose. Are we grasping that which the human mind is generally capable of doing, and is our skill learning to manipulate it? Has anyone thought about that?
Well, what we do is what everybody else can do. We just learned how to do it. We took the barriers down that keeps everybody else that makes everybody else say this can't be done. We've reverted back to what it was like to be a kid. We see things, we talk to things that everybody else says isn't there. So I think we're more open to this kind of thing because we took that barrier down. We're not necessarily learning anything. We're just opening ourselves back up to it. And everybody else...
No, go ahead. I find this very interesting. Go ahead, Chris.
Everybody else to learn how to do it because they forgot how to be a kid again. They forgot how to think like a kid, how to suspend disbelief. I think we come upon it naturally. We don't necessarily have to learn it. I don't think we ever lost it.
So the inquisitiveness, the lack of boundaries that we are born with, or most of us are born with, allows us to remember how it is and not be blocked by somebody else's boundaries. Because I was talking to a client about this today. Do you know what the number one? I was in Harrods when I think the 4th Harry Potter movie came out. I don't know. It was the 4th or the 5th or the 27th one. I don't know. But the thing, I was talking to the salesperson there who was in charge of the Harry Potter boutique. Yes, they did have a Harry Potter boutique, which was kind of brilliant. And I said to her, what is the number one question that kids ask you? The number one thing they want that you cannot give them. And she didn't even have to think. She said, invisibility cloak. Everybody wants the invisibility cloak. She said, some people come up to me and whisper to me and say, come on, I know you have one. Can you sell me an invisibility cloak? And I said to her, well, kids really want that. And she said, if only it were just children, in her very sort of, terse way. And I stood there for a moment, but what did I take from that? I took from that the spirit of the energy of being able to change form or being able to hide or become invisible, very much to what Morgan said in the very beginning of the show, which is the energy that brought Morgan to look at these kinds of materials and to learn these kinds of materials. If the number one thing that people ask the retail floor clerk at the Harry Potter boutique in Harrods is if they can have the invisibility cloak, then what does that say about what people want to learn? What does it say about what people desire? Anybody have thoughts on that? Victor?
Yeah, I think that's very much with the pop culture, because there is a huge interest in shape-shifting in paranormal and urban fantasy literature right now. When I look at all of the books that are coming out, shape-shifting into this, shape-shifting into that, it's no longer just shape-shifting into a wolf either, or into a human-wolf, werewolf hybrid. They're shape-shifting into bears. They're shape-shifting into birds. They're shape-shifting into rats. They're shape-shifting into I don't know what. But I think maybe there is just something ingrained within us that says, we want to kind of break the boundaries that we have, and there's some innate urge that humans have to be able to do this magical, mystical thing and become something that they want to be rather than what they are and what they oftentimes feel like they're stuck with.
Well, we're broadening the gaze. Go ahead, Victor.
I'm a bit older than present company, and when I was a kid, my hero was Superman. And I wanted to have a cape that I could put on and leap off the ground and fly. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly. And why did I want to fly? Because I thought that flying would give me a bigger perspective, a bigger picture than the picture I had within the context of my world at that time. Why do people want invisibility? Why do they want shape-shifting? Is it because of the broadening of the horizon, or is it because today we don't have that sense of self-worth that says we're okay the way we are, that we can grow and expand, but that something fundamentally is missing within each of us in society? Maybe it's recognition, maybe it's the sense of being loved, whatever it might be. And is that desire to be something other than that what we are, or to be invisible so that we're not seen, is that a result of that, or is it a result of something else?
Well, I read that some of this, that people wanting to be something else, is a kind of body dysmorphia, like people that look in the mirror and think they're fat when they're skinny, or vice versa. Some of that has to do with body image and how you perceive yourself. I don't know how many people that want to expand their horizons versus how many people have a mental illness. But it's just something that I read, that there was studies about this, and this is what the information is showing.
So is it an issue of escapism versus the broadening of horizons? Because
that's what I'd like to know.
So I think that it is much more the broadening of horizons, because I don't think, the more people I talk to, but you have to understand, by the time people come to me, everything else has not worked. They've prayed through it. They've worked through it. They've gone to counselors. They've done everything. By the time they come to me, they're now looking for the magic pill, or the magic wand, if you will. And they are desperate to escape something. But that is the audience that I see specifically, and I don't think that is the absolute largest audience that there is. I think more people want to fly than hide. I think more people want to experience more than experience less of who they are. And maybe that's because I'm extraordinarily creative, and I write stories and I write novels and I write all kinds of things. I want to have a sense that the human mind wants to broaden itself. We are, however, living in a very difficult period of time where one's appearance is, you can't say, well, it's just the people that know me and they've learned to deal with me. No, it's, you and 4,000 of your closest friends on Facebook. So we live in a world now where we cannot hide who we are, what we look like, if we are looking for broader communication. So I think that there's something to be said about what you just brought up, Chris, and how people are dealing, with themselves. This is why, and I use Facebook as an example, I don't know what the percentages are. I have no idea. Maybe it's just my audience that in this way, but the names that people use are very rarely their own. Present company accepted. Every one of us has a strong identity to our name in one way or the other, and we use that name. But, if I get one more, Raven Wolf, my head's going to explode. And forget it. Morganas need not apply. That's what if there was a place for a little thing you could write. So, but to the point of that, people are seeking a much broader ability. And I think that's what's very important.
Yes,
you are.
I heard beeping, so I wasn't sure. Hang on, I'm going to charge the phone. Hold on a second. Please carry on. I need to charge it.
Okay. Well, I will just bring up real quickly what you commented on, the Raven Wolves and the Morganas and that, this joke I heard, and I think, Chris, you may have heard this one too. What is the best way to get any woman at a pagan festival all to converge at the same place?
Yeah, Morgana.
You just make an announcement over the PA system that says, "Will Raven and Morgan please report to the ticket booth?" And every female in the place will be there.
I think I'm going to put a thing on Facebook that says I'm going to remove all Ravens, Morgans, and Damians. Who else do you know who has 49 Damians on their Facebook list?
Wow.
I have 49 Damians. One day we went to look because I couldn't believe it. I said, no, I couldn't. I have a few. Actually, my daughter was saying to me, no, I think you have more than a few. I have 49 Damians. That's a lot of Damians. Mm-hmm. But that goes to our point. We're kind of getting close to the end of the show tonight. I could talk about this, for another 6 months. So this month in Wednesday night classes, we're talking pretty much about invoking demons through the rest of August. And in September, I'm going to start talking more again about these kinds of energies and how we function with these energies in real time, in real life. That sorcery is not something that one has to do standing in front of their altar in a particular outfit holding a particular cup. But sorcery is something that one has to do when they are awake and when they're not awake and when they're living their lives and in all aspects of their life. And that is my mission, essentially, is to present sorcery in this way. So if everybody wants to talk about how they can be contacted, and I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And we've gone kind of broad on this subject, which is what we do. That's the point of the work. Invisibility, shape-shifting. Most people would talk about that, and you'd be hearing just a little of this and a little of that. And we got into all kinds of great science and all sorts of emotional content as well. And I'm very grateful for this team who's come together to do this great show. So it's just about 7 minutes left to our show. So why don't everybody take a moment to say how they can be found and like that. Victor, you want to give it a start?
Well, thank you. I can be reached on Facebook at Victor the Voice Furman.
And that's with an H. And I have to say that.
That's absolutely with an H. Really quickly and funny, and not funny, but quickly, talking about shape-shifting and talking about the power of your name. From the time I was a kid, I was known as Vic, not Victor. And about 6 or 8 years ago, I had a connection with a very, very wise woman and said that I really should use my full name, because by not using my full name, I was cutting off my light. The word light in Hebrew is or. And she said, by cutting your name to Vic, you're cutting off your light. And since that time, I've used Victor as my name, and it has been very empowering to do so.
Victor, I'm grateful that you met her. Is she still amongst the living?
No, she's not. She's disincarnate now.
Yeah, I want to honor her, because when you said that, I sort of Saw Flash of who that is. And I want to honor her and be grateful to her that she imparted that to you. And, you know, those sorts of moments are what we do this for. So thank you for that. Morgan?
Thank you.
Yes, you can reach me on Facebook. It's Morgan St. Knight on Facebook. And people can also reach me at Morgan St. Knight, all one word, no period after Saint, morganstknight@hotmail.com.
Thank you, Morgan. And Morgan, I want to thank you for jumping in as the producer of the show. You have made this an amazing experience, and the science that you bring to the show, extraordinarily grateful. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's great, and I'm really, really excited that you've come into this process with us. Thank you so much.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
Oh, likewise. Likewise, my friend. Mr. Chris Ostrowski, you want to bring us to a way that we can find you and talk a little bit about your work?
Yes, you can contact me on my Facebook page, Hell's Rogue. That's HEL''S. And you can find me in my email at hellsrogue@gmail.com.
Thank you, Chris. Chris is my extraordinary co-host whose energy and information is just so wonderful. And, Chris, go write that book. I'm going to say that to you every single time until you finally write that book. I just want you to know I'm going to be relentless, and I'm not going to let it go.
No, I'm in the process. I mean, it's
write that book.
I'm up to 8,600 words.
All right.
Well, that's a good start. Chris's life experience can, let's just say, it's going to be very important information, and I'm extraordinarily excited that Chris is taking the time to write it down. Morgan, how do we find your book?
Yes, you can find my book. My book is Curse of Prometheus, A Tale of Medea, and it's on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback format. And I also have a Facebook page called Tales of Medea, which you can look up on Facebook if you want the latest on where my book is going.
And just to be very clear, if anybody didn't get any of that, any one of us through me, and I'm Sorceress Cagliastro at Gmail. I keep that address because it is the easiest and simplest one for everyone to grasp, sorceresscagliastro@gmail.com. The site that represents my work at this point is CagliastroTheIronRing.com. You can look there for Wednesday night group classes and other things that are happening. There will be an enormous transformation in that site very soon. Other things are coming up as we get into the autumn, which is a much more understandable and enjoyable time for me, and there will be
Hello?
Oops. It appears we may have lost the sorceress.
I wasn't sure if we lost her or lost me.
Yeah. Well, so Chris, you are the other co-host. Would you like to take us out real quickly as we wrap up the final couple minutes of the show?
Sure. I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight with us and this exciting topic. And I look forward to doing this again with everybody.
Likewise, my friend. And Victor, it's always a pleasure to work with you as well.
And Morgan and Chris and Sorceress, a pleasure to work with. It's more than a pleasure. It's an honor. I really feel honored to be with you folks because the knowledge and wisdom that you bring to this is amazing. And I learn something new every week.
Okay. Well, I do too. And echoing what you said, it's an honor to work with both of you as well as the Sorceress, of course. This is the Dark Matters radio show, and please join us again next week at 9 o'clock Eastern Time for another exciting look into the dark matters that dwell within all of us.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.